Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
Okay, Kenna, today I wanted to ask you, were you ever suspended from school growing up?
No, I was a good girl. Okay, here's the thing though. Everyone thought I was bad because I was like goth and hung out with like all the bad kids, or like was like into metal, or like I was honestly like probably way better than like the youth group kids who were like supposedly like all the good kids, but like I got like good grades and was good in school, but everyone thought I was bad, but I was good.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone where I grew up, kind of similar, kind of different. They all thought I was like heavily involved in meth use because I was so skinny. Yeah, and then like I remember in high school, one of my friend's older sisters told her parents I wasn't allowed over at their house because I was clearly just on meth all the time. But I have ADHD, so I just am very, very hyper and very, very like small and like Skeletor. And then she had this whole like sit down with the family, and she was like, Madeline can't come over, she's clearly addicted to drugs. Which even if I was an addict, like what? That's not the way you handle that situation, right?
It's terrible.
It's like fucked up. That's like not how you treat people who are struggling with healthcare issues. But whatever. So then one day I went to my friend's house because she told me this happened, and her sister answered the door and she was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I think I left like my meth pipe here last week. And then she just looked at me like, what the fuck? I knew it. And I was like, it's a joke. But yeah. But no, so similar. I was a pretty good kid, but people definitely thought I was like a bad influence to have around their children.
Yeah, weren't you like the valedictorian of your high school?
I was valedictorian. But I kind of gave him hell. Like I was suspended once in high school. And I remember it was like a last straw kind of thing because I had been difficult in class for years. Like I fought with all of my teachers all the time. I was the kid in like history and government classes who like stood up and screamed, that's not what happened. And then like people literally had to escort me out of classrooms while I was yelling. I violated dress code every day. Like I had my nose ring in, I had my hair dyed. I'd get into fights when people would try to like stop me about dress code. I got into fights with other kids in the hallways. Like sometimes kids would try to like I went to a school where people like fist fought a lot. So sometimes kids would like try to fight with me, and I would just like make fun of them a lot to try to not get in a fist fight. But it ended up like hallway altercations, like me and other kids all the time. I ended up like skipping class most days of the week. Like I would only show up for the classes I thought were fun, and then I would like turn in and pick up assignments. At one point, the whole school, all the teachers had this meeting about like what to do with me, and there was like a line down the table, and teachers were yelling because they didn't know like how to resolve the issue of Madeline. And it was because I got really, really good grades on all of my work. So I was like a straight A student, but I was just like disrupting school every time I stepped foot on campus. And I think I was what most adults thought of as a bad kid because of that. But I was also, though, a white kid, right? I'm white. So I went to a school that was predominantly not white, and I was really good at school. I was like a straight A student, but I think that also statistically probably has to do with me being white, right? Because like school curriculum is like set up to benefit whiteness, and something about like the way that I was bad, but as a student for whom the entire like system was set up to benefit me, very obviously, right? Like I got good grades because the system was designed so people like me could get good grades. And something about me being, especially a white woman, I think I wasn't viewed as like a threat. I was viewed as like just an annoyance or something like that. And I never really got suspended or expelled, even though I think other kids, if they had done even a tenth of what I had, probably would have at my school. But I was just suspended that one time, and it happened to be the same time I was sitting in the office waiting to be suspended, and they announced my name as valedictorian over the loudspeaker, which was very funny, I guess. But yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about, like if I had been black or like disabled, in that same situation, I would not have been granted like the clemency or lenience or benefit of the doubt that I think I was as like a white little girl.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Right? So I was thinking about this, and I was looking it up, and black students with disabilities are like far more likely to get suspended in school than white able-bodied kids like I was. And as a result of that, are 4 times as likely to end up in correctional facilities like prison or jail. So today, I wanted to talk about a subject recommended by our Patreon subscriber, Charlie Wright, which is the school-to-prison pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Kenna, how familiar are you with this term, school-to-prison pipeline?
I kind of understand. I mean, I feel like being from a prison town, it's like you tend to like just the prison is in the air, you know? It's just like the vapor that's, you know, in the little mountain town that I'm from. But like, it's basically like you start getting in trouble in school, you get into like juvie, and then it just puts you in the system and you just keep kind of offending. Right. Like, quote unquote, offending in the eyes of the laws, like over and over again.
For sure. So it's definitely that. Some things that I didn't realize until I started looking into this, though, is it also refers to like the specific habits schools have of punishing certain students. So just like I was like the bad kid on campus, but I never really got into a lot of trouble. Like a lot of the school to prison pipeline actually mirrors like the like racial and ethnic inequality that happens in society at large. So it also has a lot to do with schools punishing specifically disabled people and like black and brown kids. Like that's like the who bears the brunt of it, right? And then how that contributes to those students, ending up in the system and later in life, like ending up in prison, et cetera, et cetera. So, obviously, like the history of the school to prison pipeline, it's a byproduct of racism and our country's legacy of slavery, first and foremost, because it involves prison. So our prison system is the way it is because our country started using prison labor as like a nifty little loophole once slavery became illegal in the U.S., except by punishment for a crime. So next thing you know, we start making up all sorts of reasons to arrest recently freed black people who were just trying to go about their day and live their lives. And then like, boom, 157 years later, we live in a country with the most prisoners per capita out of every country in the world. We have just 4% of the global population, but 20% of the world's prisoners. And forced labor in the U.S. in the prison system, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's a billion with a B, where we force incarcerated people to staff call centers. I didn't know we did that one.
I knew that.
Yeah, do 3D modeling.
That I did not know.
Yes, build furniture, and I knew like making clothes, even like TI calculators have, I think, used prison labor.
My mom was saying something about where I grew up, the prisoners, I forget, they raise like some sort of livestock. Maybe it was even bison.
Interesting.
Yeah, like they raise livestock and sell the livestock and also make cheese.
That's really interesting.
I think it was cheese. I might be wrong, but it was something where I was like, wow, okay.
Like an animal agriculture type situation.
Kind of thing. I think there used to also be like a prison rodeo where they would sell tickets to the prison rodeo.
Whoa, that's pretty dystopian.
I don't know if they do it anymore because of legal reasons, but I definitely know that used to be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole thing's dystopian. Like, prisoners also make military equipment. Is it any more dystopian to do the rodeo than to have prisoners, like, making military equipment? It's probably the equal level of dystopia.
Yeah. Oh, also, I saw a thing on, maybe it was YouTube or something, where prisoners train dogs for the visually impaired.
Yes, and also, like, here in California, we've talked about this before, we have the prison volunteer firefighters.
Oh, yes, and then, like, the fucked up thing about it is, like, after they are released, they cannot legally become firefighters even though they have done all the work.
Right, because they have the felony on their record or whatever. Yeah, so if you haven't listened to our episode on prisons in the U.S., it's called Keep Your Community Safe, Abolish Your Local Prison. We talk about this stuff quite a bit in there. A lot of the things we kind of just recapped. But if we want to get into some of the specific info about how the school to prison pipeline started to take root as we see it in like current times, we probably need to take a look at what was going on in the 80s. So like most awful things, this can be traced back to, can you guess, Kenna, what happened in the 80s?
Reagan.
Yes, it's Reagan.
I'm all Reaganomics.
It was definitely Ronald Reagan. I mean, we have to give a little credit to Nixon because before Reagan, there was Nixon. So in the 70s, Nixon declared a war on drugs, which is just like a ridiculous thing, really. Like, how do you fight a war on an inanimate object? Like, I don't understand that.
We in America will find a way.
We'll fight anything.
We will fight anything.
We will wage war against anything.
Abstract ideas.
Yes. Objects, anything. So at any rate, you know, obviously the way you reduce drug use or the risk of harm associated with drug use is by legalizing it and treating addiction as a healthcare issue, which we have seen be successful, like everywhere they've tried it. But no, this is the United States, so we decided to do a war on it.
like we do everything.
Yeah. So by the time Reagan took office in 1981, he was kind of like towing that Republican Party line. It was laid out by Nixon. And Reagan was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to continue this war on drugs. And I'm also going to do this whole tough on crime thing. So in doing this, drug use was wrapped up with crime in a neat little package by like the Reagan administration. And we decided to treat addiction, yes, like a crime issue rather than a healthcare issue, but throw a bunch more shit on it too. So in 1983, we saw the formation of the DARE program, which brought police officers into classrooms to attempt to like scare students straight on the topic of drugs. And Kenna, we've talked a little bit about DARE before, I think. Yeah. But just as a recap, you did DARE in school, yes?
Yeah, DARE, the drug program that taught everyone how to do drugs.
Yes, exactly.
And made them sound cool.
Yeah. So I had DARE too, and yes, it did just make us all really interested in trying PCP
and cocaine. I was like fifth grade, being like, "What is cocaine?" And they're like, "It makes you feel so good," and you're like, "What?" Yeah, it makes you feel the best you could ever feel, and you get energy, but don't do it. And you're like, "Wait, what?" I'm getting conflicting information here.
Yeah, no, definitely I came out of DARE thinking PCP sounded so cool. And then later I tried it and I was like, this is not as fun as that police officer made it sound. I could not lift a car over my head or jump off of a building or anything.
Yeah, PCP,
it's a wild one.
No good.
No, it was,
I wish I'm not going to go into...
Like many things, it was fun until it stopped being fun. But whatever. So then 1 year later, we had the 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Act, which increased penalties for drug-related crimes. In 1986, the same year I was born, the Federal Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 was signed into law. And this was, like another part of this whole war on drugs thing. This new law imposed mandatory minimum sentences for people caught using drugs, doubling down on criminalizing drug use rather than creating a path for rehabilitation for addiction and thinking of it like the healthcare issue it is. Now, I want to point out something we talked about before, but just to bring this up again. While violent and property crime has gone down dramatically since the 80s, most people chalk that up to there being like less lead poisoning now than there was 40 years ago or whatever, and not actually to any changes in policing or prison incarceration. We've cited this statistic before, but prisons have actually been found to increase your risk of committing crime by 7%. Police solve just 2% of all major crimes, and of that 2%, it's worth noting that 63% of wrongfully convicted people exonerated due to DNA evidence are Black. So that 2% that they're solving is a whole mess anyway, built on racism too. So criminalizing drug use and getting tough on crime didn't actually do anything to contribute to our communities being safer today. Reagan is just like, yeah, we're getting tough on crime, blah, 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 we're on drugs. I'm guessing to just put fear into the hearts of the Republican masses to ensure votes while also like driving up incarceration rates for things like drug use to create an ever-growing base of free prison labor to uphold capitalism. Meanwhile, the thing that actually most people are starting to think did the most contributions to our communities getting safer was the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act was passed in 1970, which led to us cutting lead out of gasoline, which had been linked to aggressive behavior to the extent that lead exposure made people 4 times as likely to get in trouble with the law. And as lead began to be removed from gasoline, we saw lead rates in American blood dropping over 81% from 1976 to 1991. As the rates of lead poisoning dropped, crime rates dropped right along with them. And one study in Pittsburgh alone attributes up to 38% of the drop in violent crime through the late 80s to now to the Clean Air Act alone. And if that interests you, we have this whole episode about it called Everyone in Power Has Lead Poisoning, which is full of all sorts of interesting info on that. But nonetheless, Reagan was content to think that the decreasing crime rates were because of increased policing and incarceration, despite all evidence showing that this is not the case. And the idea of being tough on crime managed to trickle down all the way into our education system. So in 1994, Congress passed the Gun-Free Schools Act, requiring states to expel students who brought firearms to campus. This was more of a response to like gang violence, which was kind of like a racist fear-mongering thing that the tough on crime idea focused on in the 90s. While, yeah, there were gangs and they existed, organized crime has always existed in the U.S., and it usually is where people turn when they don't have economic opportunities to earn a good living within the existing system, or when people within organized crime seem to like show more care and compassion and empathy than the outside world does. Culturally, we were glamorizing things like The Godfather, right? Like gangs of white people that we'd always known existed. But increasingly, white people were more and more frightened of the idea that maybe black and brown people might be involved in organized crime too. So teenagers of color just became a scapegoat for this whole racist fear that happened. And then that same year, 1994, is when schools started amalgamating the war on drugs and the gun-free schools thing into one simple term to guide expectations of students' behavior: the zero tolerance policy.
Oh, yeah. I remember at my high school, that was like, and actually elementary school, now that I think about it, like all through school, because it's like a small school system. You know, there are some people I went to school with from kindergarten through high school.
Wow.
Like, same class.
Oh my gosh.
One guy now is now my dentist.
Oh.
If I visit my parents. But anyway, it was very like you get into a, you know, it was wild. If you got into a fist fight, even if you got into a fist fight but you didn't punch back, you got suspended. If you punch back, you got expelled.
Whoa.
In elementary school, they had zero tolerance on biting.
Biting?
If you bit another kid, you would get expelled. And it was wild because I think it was because like we had like, I don't think we had the best school nurse or policy or system. It was a really bad, wild response to the AIDS epidemic.
Oh, yes. That makes sense. There were a lot of really weird things that came out.
Where they're like, you can't bite another kid because, like, you could, you know, like...
Yes.
And I'm just like, now we know that that's stupid.
Right,
but,
right.
Like, it was such, like, a backwards, like, school where, yeah, there was, like, zero tolerance for, like, anything.
Did you guys have to sign like a paper that like acknowledged the school's zero tolerance policy in class?
I don't remember, but it was like basically like I think that's why I was so it was like I was so, even though I was like I was good, it was just like I just did not want to get expelled or suspended because I knew getting good grades was the only, and going to college was the only way I was going to get out. So exactly. I was like, because like people would violate dress code. Like at one point, one of the things you could do to violate dress code was to dress in all black because it was right after Columbine.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You could get expelled.
That's so wild.
And there's only one, you know, there's no other schools to go to unless you want to go to a county over or the alternative high school, which may or may not let you in.
Right.
So it was like, I just very much lived in fear because I'm like, oh, well, if my skirt is 1 inch above my fingertips, like I don't want to get expelled. Like,
yeah. So I remember at our school, we had the zero tolerance policies and you had to sign them. And it was like just a piece of paper that said, yes, I know if I'm caught. Ours was not as extreme as yours. Ours was just like, if I'm caught with drugs or in a gang fight, specifically had to be a gang fight or with a weapon, I'll be instantly expelled. No conversations about it, nothing. So we had like zero tolerance for weapons or drugs, basically, or for the gang thing because they sold drugs and carried weapons. And that played into that whole war on drugs thing. So ours was definitely not as extreme as it sounds like yours were. But I did have a friend who was expelled in 7th grade on a zero tolerance thing because someone found a pocket knife in his locker, like a Swiss Army knife, basically.
Yeah, and I feel like it was very similar. Like anything could get you expelled. But I also felt like it was not very fairly applied.
Exactly. It's a little open-ended. Like, if I had gone to your school, I don't know. I wonder if I would have gotten into more trouble. Because everything I did at my school was annoying, yes, but it didn't violate any of the, like, zero tolerance policies.
I think you definitely would have gotten expelled at my school.
Yeah.
But it's like a small rural town that's
Right.
like majority white. I
Yes.
don't know. It's like it's way different than Fresno. I don't know. You know?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, like, I do remember zero tolerance policies were really extreme, and they were put in place and kind of communicated, especially when you were a teenager, like at the high school level, that all teenagers were like potential threats just waiting to happen.
Yeah. Oof.
Yes, right? We were children, sure, but there was also this overwhelming idea that adults should fear us for some reason.
I felt that way too, especially because like we were in I keep reiterating small town, but it was just like there was like actually for such a small town a large contingency of like what you would call now like alt kids,
Right.
Which basically was like if you were like a weird kid, you just banded together. There were the freaks and there were the jocks,
Right.
And
We kinda
freaks
had that
included
too.
like the goths, the metalheads, the skaters, like just general weirdos.
Yeah. Non-denominational weirdos.
Non-denominational weirdos, yes.
Yeah.
And it's just like if you were not like a preppy, which it was like what you would call now basic.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe it would be basic. They were like jocks.
Jocks, yeah.
You were a jock.
You were a jock or a freak, and if you were a freak, you had a target on your back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like because I grew up in a place that was not predominantly white, like white privilege, like cloaked the white kids. Like we as white kids didn't get in nearly as much trouble as kids of color did because of racism is the only thing I can think of. But like since the 90s, zero tolerance policies have become increasingly vague and open-ended, like more like what you experienced at school. And this like vague nature and open-ended, like open to interpretation, like notional idea of zero tolerance policies, it allows for swift disciplinary action for whatever an educator deems to fall under the guidelines laid out. So zero tolerance policies effectively became the broken windows theory of policing, but applied to a school level.
Yeah, and we know that the broken windows has been totally debunked.
Right. Do you want to explain what broken windows was?
Broken windows is basically this idea that little things like property crime lead to bigger crime. They lead to an increase in crime. So you have to police very intensely things like property damage, broken windows in cars, like petty theft. You have to police that very strongly so crime doesn't grow. But it has been completely debunked.
Right. It doesn't work. So what schools were doing was just kind of like what people were doing with this broken windows theory of policing in the 90s. Like at the legal level, but schools were doing it at the school level. And they were like, okay, we'll crack down on small offenses in order to discourage more serious ones. However, just like at the like federal prison crime level, what we see is that increased punitive action for minor infractions does not create safer communities. If anything, it drives the victims of these policies into lives with fewer options and opportunities and increases their risk of reoffending. So then around 1995, like a year after, kind of the zero tolerance policy thing kicks off, an academic named John J. DiIulio Jr. I can't pronounce it. I'm so sorry.
Names are hard.
DiIulio. Well, this guy, we'll call him John. John coined the term super predators for a cover story.
Oh, God, I remember this.
Yes, in the Weekly Standard, which was then a new magazine, and it was just full of conservative political opinion. So super predator was a term being used to describe teenagers, mostly.
Children,
and disproportionately black and brown teenagers who are chronically involved in altercations with the law. So we know that our police system is completely racist and corrupt and often does target and repeatedly harass, especially black teenage boys. But this guy, John, with the last name I can't pronounce, he instead argued that this was happening because of some sort of failure on the part of those boys themselves. He said it was the result of, quote, moral poverty, the poverty of being without loving, capable, responsible adults who teach you right from wrong. So that was his quote.
Makes me mad and sad to be like, oh, we can't blame the system that these kids grow up in. It's all the kids.
Right. And obviously it's super fucking racist, right?
It's so racist, dude. Oh my God. And
yeah. It's a subtle way for him to imply that black families aren't loving or something
Exactly.
fucked up or infuriating with that.
Exactly.
Which also, he's doing this while refusing to take accountability for the ways in which poor people and people of color often have to work twice as hard as their white or like moneyed peers just to put food on the table due to systemic inequality in the US. Like, so yeah, maybe like in lower class families, your parents aren't present as much because they're like often working multiple jobs to support you, which is not anybody's fault, but is the fault of like a racist system.
Yeah, or just like the system is set up to specifically go after Black people and people of color.
And then those communities are over-policed.
Yeah.
But this idea of the super predator, it stuck with American conservatives. They loved this.
Also been debunked. There was a good episode on You're Wrong About
the super predator, yeah. So this guy, John, said that by the year 2000, we would have 30,000 young murderers, rapists, and muggers roaming America's streets, sowing mayhem. It's a very specific number also. I feel like the specificity of the number makes it sound pseudoscientific, and then people like that.
That's like the thing where they always, like, when we were growing up in the night, they're like, 10 million children a year go missing. And you're like, that's like 10% of children.
Yeah, that's not happening.
You're like, I don't think that.
Yeah, well, we don't have 30,000. In the year 2000, when I turned 13, there were not 30,000 young murderers, rapists, and muggers roaming America's streets. So obviously he was wrong. But according to him, this is a quote from him, they place zero value on the lives of their victims, whom they reflexively dehumanize as just so much worthless white trash. This is what he said. Ugh. So as you can see, he himself had a clear idea of the race or ethnicity of these super predators right out of the gate. If the victims were white people, then that means the super predators were people of color, right? In his head. And in reality, according to the Marshall Project, juvenile arrests for murder and juvenile crime generally had already started falling when his article was published. And by the year 2000, when tens of thousands more children were supposed to be out there mugging and killing, juvenile murder arrests had fallen by 2/3.
Yeah, it's wild how crime just keeps getting lower and lower, and people just cannot believe it. And to me, it's like, yeah, no wonder people don't believe that crime is getting low and lower because of people like this who get on like TV shows and like news networks, and they have some sort of air of quote unquote like respectability where you're just like, what?
Yeah, no, they definitely like make a living by fear mongering. It's fear mongering and sensationalism. So in 1995, what we have like culturally happening in the United States is this. We have a bunch of relatively new laws getting tough on crime. We have the increasing incorrect idea that crime is being committed by Black and brown teenagers, and zero tolerance policies in school, along with an increasing police presence via programs like DARE. And all of this sets the stage for what we now call the school to prison pipeline, which is a series of policies that increasingly view children of color as dangerous criminals that need to be controlled and put more and more emphasis on schools being the place to start carceral processes early. Today, these policies have led us to a place where, across the United States, police officers routinely arrest children and transport them to juvenile detention centers for minor classroom infractions, while police are allowed to roam schools fully armed and are given unfettered authority to stop, frisk, detain, question, search, and arrest school children on and off school grounds.
Okay, to go back to the episode about the Olympics, at one point, the LA school district had a tank.
That's right.
They had an armored vehicle.
So wild. And we've seen videos of students being physically restrained by police officers in classrooms. It's like we as a country have forgotten that these are literal children being abused and traumatized when they should be cared for. It's not uncommon for there to be a permanent station of police officers on campus at many high schools. I know we had an on-campus police station at my high school when I was growing up.
We did not.
I
am actually surprised by, because it being a prison town, there were lots of cops in that city for like such a small amount of people.
Yeah, so maybe it's like bigger schools probably are more likely to have them, or maybe, like more like urban schools. You know, also though, you went to a predominantly white high school. I went to one that was not predominantly white, and that's probably why we have an increased police presence there too.
Also, at my school, we had a gun range in the basement for ROTC.
Yeah, that is wild. That never ceases to blow my mind. That is just shocking information.
Yeah, oof. Living rural areas, oof, man.
So from 1997 to 2007, the number of these police officers placed in schools, which are called SROs or school resource officers, it increased by like 38% according to some accounts, but at a minimum by 1/3 nationwide. They were supposed to be put there to protect students from things like mass shootings. However, in reality, they just continued the racist policing policies happening in the community at large, just inside of a school setting now. The idea of discipline in an academic setting has become synonymous with police or carceral action. In 2013, Congress held a hearing on this phenomenon, and Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois remarked, "For many young people, our schools are increasingly a gateway to the criminal justice system. This phenomenon is a consequence of a culture of zero tolerance that is widespread in our schools and is depriving many children of their fundamental right to an education." As with most things in the U.S., these policies are disproportionately affecting students of color and students with disabilities. According to the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, Black students are 3.5 times more likely than their white classmates to be suspended or expelled. One report also found that while students with disabilities, make up less than 10% of the public school base, they make up 32% of youths in juvenile detention centers. And among disabled students, we see the intersection of race play out too. About 1 in 4 Black children with disabilities get suspended at least once, versus just 1 in 11 white students with disabilities. Even controlling for variables like socioeconomic class, studies have found that Black students are just disproportionately punished at a much higher rate than their peers, as are children with emotional disabilities. Jackie Gradington, chair of the NEA Black Caucus, says studies have shown that a Black child, especially a male, is seen to be a bigger threat just because they exist. According to Kirwan Institute research on implicit bias, Black students do not act out in class more frequently than their white peers, but they are more likely to be sent to the principal's office for subjective, intangible offenses like disrupting class, and they're more likely to be sent there by white teachers. These racial differences in suspension rates have grown since the 1970s, back when Nixon first introduced the war on drugs, and mirror prison incarceration issues with race. Today, more people are sent to prison in the U.S. for nonviolent drug offenses than for violent crimes. And just like Black students are more likely to be punished in classrooms, Black adults are more likely to be punished by police and courts at a carceral level. Black people are 13 times more likely to be in prison for things like drug use, despite not using drugs at a higher rate than their white peers. And 2 out of every 5 Black people sent to prison are sent there for drug offenses, versus just 1 in 4 white prisoners. In total, Black men are incarcerated at nearly 10 times the rate of white men nationwide, and many of these are wrongful convictions. Black people are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than white people, and 12 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of drug possession than white people. Oof. Those are huge numbers, like 12 times as much. That's 1,200%. That's a huge jump. And just like prisons don't make communities safer, punitive discipline at a school level doesn't make students academically perform any better either. Students assigned to stricter middle schools, where they're more likely to crack down on you if you break rules, they are 3.2 percentage points more likely to have been arrested, 2.5 percentage points more likely to be incarcerated as adults. They are also 1.7 percentage points more likely to drop out of high school completely, and 2.4 percentage points less likely to attend a 4-year college. So the types of discipline being used are re-entering severe territories as well. In 2010, over 250,000 students were referred to police officers for misdemeanor tickets for minor classroom infractions. Things which teachers acknowledge in the past, probably would have just elicited a stern talking to. This blows my mind to me. That a cop could arrest you or give you a ticket for something minor you did in class. That same year, 2010, one 12-year-old girl was handcuffed, arrested, and transported from her school to an NYPD police precinct where she was detained for several hours, all for writing, "I love my friends Abby and Faith," on her desk in Spanish class with an erasable marker. They said it was vandalism.
Oh my God.
I know. It's just mind-blowing. In 2013, 7 North Carolina teenagers staged an end-of-year prank. Did you guys do those at your high school?
I don't know. I was not into, school spirit. Yeah. Not into it.
Okay, so in our school, there were end-of-year pranks. These were pretty common. So these kids did a water balloon fight, which honestly is a pretty mild one. That's not bad. They just had a water balloon fight at school. They were all arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. Wild. One 6th grade student at a school was arrested for kicking a trash can. 6th grader. Yeah. One high school junior went to get her driver's license only to find out that she had a warrant for her arrest that had been issued when she was in middle school for a fist fight she got into when an older girl attacked her. Apparently, her teacher had instructed the police to give her a ticket, and it had been issued without her even realizing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. In 2015, a video went viral of a police officer flipping over a teenage girl at her desk, throwing the girl across the room. And Black and Latino students account for 70% of these police referrals from schools. As one article on Vox explains, it's not surprising to see these types of things play out, though, when you realize that the school discipline and the criminal justice system have already been intertwined. NEA Executive Committee member Kevin Gilbert said, "My eyes were opened by a young man I met who spent 21 days in a juvenile detention center basically for talking back in class." As the Vox article states, in many cases, schools themselves are the ones pushing students into the juvenile justice system, often by having students arrested at school. From 2011 to 2012 alone, 92,000 students were arrested in schools, like full arrest, and 74% of them were for low-level violations. The chief judge of the juvenile court in Clayton County, Georgia, once remarked to Congress at a 2012 hearing that these arrests were happening because kids had simply made an adult mad.
I'm sure if that would have been an option at the high school that I went to, there would have been kids arrested all the time.
Yeah, it definitely is getting much worse, for sure, based on all the data. It's like a widening amount of arrests that are happening like every single year. So I feel like you and I started high school maybe in 2000, 2001. I think 2001.
2000?
Yeah.
Maybe 90... Maybe the tail end of 99.
Yeah, so we kind of like got the beginning effects of all of these like new policy changes in the 90s. Like we got the zero tolerance. I had the police station, on campus. But I feel like all of these things are just getting exacerbated and it's becoming like an increasing issue because these things too, now that I'm hearing like a 6th grader getting arrested for kicking a trash can, that definitely would not have happened at my school. At my school, we had a pregnant 6th grader, which is very, very sad. And she punched our principal in the face. And she was not even, I think she was suspended, but she came back to school. Like, she was not arrested. No, you know what I mean? So a 6th grader's like, that's a child. There's obviously a lot happening in the story about my school. But, it's to punish these kids like this, I don't think it would have been that extreme. We caught the beginning of it, and it's just gotten a lot worse over our lifetime, basically.
I do remember, though, when I was in elementary school, the state of Colorado still had corporal punishment.
For students?
Yeah, like, I think a teacher or a principal could legally spank you.
Whoa, that's pretty wild.
I'm pretty sure. Like, maybe it was, like, very, very young, or they were just like, now we can't do that anymore. But I remember they, like, didn't make it clear that the principal could not spank you.
They implied there was implicit spanking. Wow.
Yeah, so it may have not been legal, but they weren't like, maybe. They were like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
That is so wild. Well, okay, so another major thing people look at when examining the school to prison pipeline is the increasing popularity of specifically suspension as a disciplinary tool. So suspensions became more and more common like every single year. And studies show that removing children from school for any reason, including disciplinary suspension, does not contribute to any positive behavioral changes for those students. All in all, a suspension interrupts a student's learning and also can be life-altering for that student. It is the number one predictor, more than poverty, of whether children will drop out of school, encounter increased likelihood of unemployment, and ultimately, yes, end up in prison.
Yeah, to me, it's so wild in a place that's like supposedly like we're teaching children like the ways of the world or education, whatever, to have it be so punitive rather than like we're suspending you to basically fuck you, like we fucking can't stand you, get out of here, instead of just being like, we want to help you, like how do we make this better, like if it's like something that's really bad behavior, like why don't we teach you how to change it?
Right. No, exactly. It's very punitive. And it is just, adults getting annoyed with children, which is wild because, like, you chose this position.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a hot take where I feel like sometimes, like being a teacher attracts people who really like being in power dynamics where they have more power.
I definitely have had a few teachers like that growing up. There were definitely some teachers I had where I'm like now as an adult, I look back and I'm like, why were you fighting with me? I was 12.
Yeah, I had a teacher call me a bitch when I was in elementary school.
And
I'm
wild.
Like, I would never, ever do that to a kid.
That's so
like,
wild.
even if the kid did something where I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I would just, I would never call a kid a name. That's so silly. That's so wild.
It's ridiculous. So, like, according to an article in U.S. News and World Report, children who attend schools with high suspension rates specifically, they're significantly more likely to be arrested and jailed as adults, but especially if they are Black or Hispanic and a boy. Like, these specific things. And this starts as early as preschool.
Ugh.
When Black children represent just 18% of preschool students in the U.S., they still account for 48% of preschool suspensions.
Wait, you can get suspended in preschool?
Yes, these are like 4-year-olds.
I will say when I was like a teeny tiny little Kenna, I may have bit another child.
Did you get suspended for biting a child?
I did not. Because
Yeah.
I was a baby.
Because you're a child. You're 4. You're a toddler.
I think I was like 2.
It's wild. So studies continuously show that there is a correlation between higher levels of education and lower levels of what's called criminal activity, which makes sense when you consider that higher levels of education correlate with higher crime, and police are less likely to patrol higher income areas. Like, poor communities of color are consistently over-policed, according to all available data, mostly due to racism compounded into new police algorithms, which is something we talked about in our episode, The Racist Ghost in the Machine. So it's not like poor people are out doing all the crime. It's like, yeah, police are highly centered in poor communities of color, and they're doing all the stop and frisk. They're over-policing. And as we see from all of the data about wrongfully convicted people, they're just arresting people for no reason.
I feel like if, like, you can make anything a crime. Like, I feel like you could get, like, if the police want to arrest you, they will find a reason.
They will. That's true. Going to college is one potential way to, like, earn enough income to price yourself into a nicer neighborhood where police simply maintain less of a presence. However, as one report shows, even minor in-class suspensions can hinder students' ability to apply to and attend college. 73% of American colleges and universities collect high school disciplinary information, and 89% of those use that information in their admissions decisions. So having suspensions on your record in high school adversely affects students' abilities to further their own education with college.
That's one thing. Okay, everyone's talking about how now many colleges are not requiring SAT and ACTs because basically if you're rich, you can pay for the programs, or
Right.
like I think it was one like Ivy League school that was like you don't, for like this certain degree, I think it was like a humanities degree, you don't have to know Latin anymore.
Right.
Because who knows Latin? People who go to private school.
Right.
And it's like, why don't you also take off disciplinary and suspensions, because they disproportionately affect people of color.
Right. And it's the same thing with SATs, actually. They were finding that the SATs were ending up being super racist. And it's like, okay, these disciplinary reports are also super racist. It's compounding like the racism of like individuals and also like our educational systems all into one thing.
Also, it's just like, they're fucking kids.
They're
man.
children. Yeah. To expect that children will have a clean record with no disciplinary action is, I feel like that's too extreme. You know, as children, like, that's what you're doing. You're testing your place in the world. You're pushing boundaries. You're trying to like figure things out and figure yourself out. And like, especially because I was such like a bad kid because I was fighting with everybody all the time. Just like knowing that for many like kids of color, like children of color aren't given the opportunity to be kids like that. Like, if you, like, for me, if I was like, I shoplifted, I'm bad, haha, it's like, oh, she's just figuring out the world. But, like, if I were a black boy and I shoplifted, like, I could end up in prison for the rest of my life based on that offense, you know? Or I could be killed by the police. Like,
yeah.
We're not viewing children of color as children. We're not giving them opportunities to, like, try things out and make mistakes and, you know, do the normal kid stuff that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and people forget that your brain keeps developing, like, into your 20s.
Yeah, your brain's not even developed. So additionally, there's also, like, the obvious issue that if you get suspended, like, just being out of class makes it harder for you to follow the material and harder to catch up when you come back to class, right? And this leads to overall lower performance in class at the high school level, which also makes applying for higher education more difficult. 31% of students who were suspended or expelled from school had to repeat a grade, compared to just 5% of students who didn't. And then there's also the issue that when students start struggling to keep up with the materials, teachers are actually incentivized to remove them from the classroom due to increased demands for teacher accountability, contributing to things like standardized tests. Having students perform poorly on a test reflects badly on the teacher, and they can honestly get in trouble for it at the school level. Sometimes it's easier to find a reason to remove students from the classroom completely than do the hard work of actually trying to teach them if they're struggling, which some people suspect may be another component of why students with learning disabilities are suspended with more frequency.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Be like, well, I have to teach to this test. If I don't think this kid will do good on the test.
Right.
I'm going to find any reason.
Well, and also maybe if you have an emotional disability, you're not kind of reacting in the classroom setting the same way as some of the more neurotypical children or kids who don't have that, then it becomes you're an easy target too. Mm-hmm. So students who have been suspended or expelled are also 3 times more likely to come into contact with the juvenile probation system the following year compared to someone who wasn't. And if you're thinking maybe it's a correlative issue, maybe it's just bad kids who've been bad their whole lives and would keep being bad no matter where you put them, and it's not the suspensions that are causing it, well, there is actually a study for that too. Researchers found that students who had been reprimanded in class for similar behavioral issues but not suspended or arrested did not share these same statistics as those who had. So one man, James Duran, the dean of discipline at a middle school in Denver, he reported a history of being a repeat suspender. According to him, I was suspending upwards of 300 kids a year. And I'll admit it, that's just what we did in schools. We suspended kids. Looking back, it was a big cop-out. Basically, it just gave kids permission to not be in school. So suspensions just don't work, basically, at a classroom level or at a personal individual child level. Daniel Kim, an organizer with Denver's Padres Unidos, says there's a way to get kids out of the classroom, but it's a really short-sighted view because that kid is coming back, which is kind of what you're talking about too. When you come back from a suspension, it's almost impossible to keep up with your work, to make sure you're getting back on track. And in 2010, more than 3 million students were suspended for school, which was double the level of suspensions in the 1970s when all of this started.
Which is weird to me because wasn't the crime rate actually higher in the 70s?
Exactly. The crime rate was way higher.
Being if you're going to go by that metric, they were being badder.
Yeah, they were more bad. In 2013, one 7-year-old in Maryland was suspended for chewing a Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun.
Oh, no.
I know, little baby, 7-year-old. In 2014, a senior at a Michigan high school was fully expelled for forgetting a pocket knife in her purse, very similar to my friend growing up. And another student at one school was expelled for making air guns with their fingers.
What?
Yeah. So we're just suspending kids for absolutely any reason just to kind of get them out of the way, get them out of my line of sight or whatever. So this kind of brings us to what do we do about it? And according to a research study published by Education Next, any effort to maintain safe and orderly school climates must take into account the clear and negative consequences of exclusionary discipline practices for young students, and especially young students of color, which last well into adulthood. The Kirwan Institute blames cultural deficit thinking, which leads educators to harbor negative assumptions about the ability, aspirations, and work ethic of these students, especially poor students of color, based on the assumption that they and their families do not value education. So as NEA.org explains, these racist perceptions create a stereotype that students of color are disrespectful and disruptive, which zero-tolerance policies then exploit. A major place that this happens is at the principal level. One study found that principals who often oversee the suspension and expulsion of students were the major driver in the frequency and severity of school discipline. And principals who doled out high numbers of suspensions or expulsions at one school would do the same at the next if they changed workplaces. However, an additional opportunity to fix this issue is at a teacher level. To me, the obvious issue is racism. As Charlotte Hayer, president of the Richmond Education Association, explains, for teaching and learning to take place, schools must be safe and caring spaces. She says, you need to teach teachers how to build relationships with students who might not be like them. Which gets to the root of the issue. Teachers and school administrators are bringing their own racism into the classroom with them, now enforced by a racist police state at their back, and readily available on campus, right there. So it seems like teachers view all students of color as a potential threat or violent criminal, just waiting to happen. And they just want them out of the classroom at any cost. Even as juvenile crime rates decrease in the U.S., along with adult crime rates, we see that people still seem to think that school violence is a growing problem. And this fear of violence makes students of color the target. which is obviously due to like systemic racism that paints especially Black men as a threat. And we carry this all the way down to how we view Black children, even at the 4-year-old level in preschools. We've demonized men of color and we've demonized youth. And in doing so, we've made youth of color a primary target for the full violence of our racist police state, which we've now invited into our schools. So I found this really interesting article written by Nancy A. Heitzeg, who's a professor of sociology and program director of critical studies of race and ethnicity at St. Catherine University in St. Paul. This paper is called Education or Incarceration, Zero Tolerance Policies and the School to Prison Pipeline. And a few sentences from this paper like really summed it up quite nicely, I thought. So I'm going to read this now. It's a big quote. The school-to-prison pipeline does not exist in a vacuum. It is deeply connected to a socio-political climate that is increasingly fearful and punitive. The tendency towards criminalization and incarceration has seeped into the schools, and with each year, the legal net ensnares younger and younger children. TV news constructs a portrait of crime, criminals, and victims that is not supported by any data. In general, the research indicates that violent crime and youth crime is dramatically overrepresented. Crime coverage has increased in spite of falling crime rates. African Americans and Latinos are overrepresented as offenders and underrepresented as victims. Some estimates indicate that as much as 2/3 of violent crime coverage focused on youth under the age of 25. The context for the current climate of repressive youth policies was set back in the late 80s and throughout the 90s. Media-generated hysteria inextricably linked teen super predators, gang violence, and the crack cocaine epidemic, and all were unmistakably characterized as issues of race. The coverage of the youth gangs, which focused almost exclusively on African American and Latino gangs, exaggerated the extent of gang membership and gang violence, contributing to the creation of moral panic. Headlines screamed dire warnings about legions of teen super predators that would come of age by 2010. And of course, they were urban, they were Black, and they were brown. These media representations have real consequences. TV news coverage of crime reflects and reinforces the culture of fear. So I liked that quote because it kind of ties in like a lot of ideas we talk about a lot in all of our episodes. And it seems like the school to prison pipeline kind of like reflects all of the different things that we know to be true about how our country operates, from like the fear perspective, from the media perspective, from our ideas of danger, from like the current like way that we try to do this thing in the United States today where we pretend like we're post-race and we just never address like our legacy of racism. And it seeps into all these different things, and we say like, well, no, that's not racist. It's just raw data that we see over here. But like, we refuse to acknowledge the data is built on a legacy of racism.
Or the interpretation of the data.
Right, exactly. So just like prison abolition advocates for fighting like with a transformative and restorative practice on the prison level, education advocates are fighting for restorative and transformative action at the education levels as well. Restorative practices in the classroom encourage educators to get to the root of disciplinary issues, kind of like you were talking about. Like, why is nobody just sitting down with kids and being like, hey, what's going on with you? These practices encourage teachers to have in-depth, facilitated conversations with students. And when issues arise, they can practice empathy and accountability for how everyone's actions affect each other. And at the transformative level, well, it's the same shit it always is, man. It's racism, ableism, and capitalism. We need to work to undo the centuries of systemic inequality that the country was built on. And as consumers of media, even like politics as media, we need to employ critical thinking skills to know when we're being lied to. The capitalist corporate two-party machine will always benefit from us fearing the other at a racial and ethnic level, but also simply at an age level. Like, teenagers are not the enemy, they're kids. And as adults, it's our job to look out for them, build a better world for them to grow into, and protect them from harm. Instead, it seems adults are hell-bent on becoming the harm these kids will have to encounter. Educator Kevin Gilbert, who we talked about earlier, put it simply, but perhaps best, by saying, we need to step back and look at our discipline structures. We need to make sure that they're going to help and not hurt students. So, yeah, what do you think? School to prison pipeline.
Yeah, it's awful. It is like everything we've been talking about magnified. And I just think about the thing where it's like, you can't just sit down and talk to a kid and be like, hey, what's up? Like, what's going on here? Like, if a kid is actually being like a disruption or like making it hard to like teach the other kids, like there's something else going on that's like happening at like a systemic level. And also it just, this is kind of maybe like my brain works where it's like, I don't know if this is quite a linear thought, but I'm like, how come like as adults we are so weird to children? And it's like, we were kids once. We were
Yeah.
teenagers once. How come we're like, oh, we have to punish these kids, or like they're these like separate like weird entities where it's just like they're just people who are not as old as us. So it's like, how come we can't just be like allies to kids, or just be like, okay, how do we work this out between our generations, rather than being like, fuck these kids.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. All these adults in school are just like, fuck these kids, call the cops. And you're just like, dude, what? Like, this is gnarly. But, okay, I have kind of a hot take. So, my hot take is that I think that people like the idea of children. Like, parents like the idea of having children, or, like, teachers like the idea of working with children. But I think that, like, they don't often have the patience that it takes to really like sit down and work with another human life as it's learning and growing. And that could be like a condition of capitalism, right? Like teachers might be stressed out because work is a lot harder than they thought it would be, and because they're not being paid enough, and maybe they just don't have like the mental capacity to deal with this, which I'm like sympathetic for and empathetic for, but also that doesn't absolve them of accountability. Like, you're a teacher calling the cops on your kids. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, and it's like, I understand, and it's like, it also is a product of capitalism, because like schools are the one place in this country that is basically socialized. You go to school for free.
That's true.
You know, it's like, you know, most people go to public school.
Yeah.
And it is mandated. Like, that is, and it's like, and I think because of kind of like the Reaganomics type thing, where it's just like, people realize that this is like a really big socialist part of America. So to me, there's a reason why schools are tied to property taxes, and like schools with lower incomes get less resources.
Yeah, I think also, like, when you look at, like, schools being, like, a thing that the public can access, it is pretty telling that, like, suspensions are a way that we see schools denying access to Black and brown students.
Yeah, and it's, like, it's also just, like, if, you know, if schools had all the resources that they need, like, it goes against, like, the capitalistic ethos of like, you are as worthy as much as you produce. And that's kind of like schools now. It's like you're only a worthy student if you fit into the model of school. You can sit for 8 hours. You can pay attention for 8 hours. You don't speak up against authority, even if the authority figure is wrong.
Right.
You know, all these things, it's like it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like fascist. Like,
it is.
I mean, I do not have a background in education, but to me, like, a thing that I know just from anecdotal experience of being a teenager, like, punishment never actually solves the issue.
Right. You need positive reinforcement, and you also need just like conversations. Like, I think a lot about my dad. My dad was a really, really good parent, and I think the thing that made him a really good parent is he was very patient, and he always took time to sit down and explain things to me. And I never would have done something that would have inconvenienced my dad, because I viewed him as like, we're on the same team. Like, my dad's my partner in life. Like, he's going to help me figure things out. And I gotta, like, even just as little as like, we're at the store, like, I'm going to make sure not to cause any inconvenience for him while we're at the store, you know, because we're on the same team and I don't want to make his day harder. And I think that's like what happens when adults take the time to like sit down with teenagers and, you know, remember that they're children and they're in this like weird liminal state, right, where they're not quite like little kids and they're not quite adults. It's a transitionary state, but like, you still need to like sit down with them, like explain your goals and listen to what their goals are too, you know? Like, there has to be like mutual respect, and that takes patience and that takes time, and you have to be okay doing that.
And you know what we don't have, you know, time is money.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny because my mom said something while I was visiting that like kind of pissed me off, but I was like, you're technically right. She's like, we live in a capitalist society. And I was like, and I was like, you technically are correct.
Yeah.
Like, where it's just like, time, like, for many people, time is money. Like,
very much.
If you think about teachers too, like, maybe it's, you know, they get paid whatever amount, like, but spending time with students, maybe it takes more time than you're getting paid for, or you're just like, damn, I also got a life outside of work. I have 40 other kids to think about.
Right.
And, you know, some people have the time and they're great teachers. And I think we all remember the teachers who were really good to us and it kind of changed our lives. you know?
Yeah, one of the teachers that was really, really important in my life was my debate coach. And I remember like one time I went and sat in on a class she was teaching, and she was a pretty new teacher. She was like a young teacher. So they gave her the hardest English class, because the way it worked at our school is like, if you were a teacher, the longer you were there, you got like the higher level classes. So she was new. So she had basically the kids who were like in and out of class a lot. Like our school, a lot of kids didn't go to school with very much consistency. Like we also had like a program where we would take in students who had recently been released from prison and wanted to like complete their degrees like on campus. You know, we had all these interesting programs at my school. So her class was full of students who had been in and out of class a lot. You know, they weren't going to continuation school. They were trying to make a go of it at our school, but they were like the difficult kids, basically. And I was sitting in on one of her classes with them once, and, you know, she was a really good teacher, and she was really trying to engage the students. And I saw this one kid who was just like not paying attention, and I sat down next to him, and we were the same age, you know, and I was just like, hey, like, I have a question. Like, why don't you care about school? Like, I don't know. I just always try to get a good grade, and like, if I can, because why not? Why don't you care though? And he was like, I don't know. It's just like, what's it going to do for me, you know? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, I guess, like, if you don't want to go to college or anything like that. And, you know, I didn't know that then, but I now know that even going to college, that doesn't mean your life is going to be great. It gives you like a 6% advantage over income or something like that. But I just asked him, I was like, well, what do you want to do instead? Like, what sounds better to you? And he's like, well, I don't know. It's like, I can go to school and do well and get like a job at Burger King and make minimum wage. Like, I'm not going to live off that. So when I asked him what he wanted to do instead, he was like, well, my brother steals cars, and that's really good money. So I'll probably just steal cars with my brother. And then I was just like, oh, yeah, for sure. Like, how can I argue with that? You know, like, you can't argue with that. Like, stealing cars is better money than whatever the fuck you get out of sitting through class and trying your best to do well and getting a high school diploma and then getting, like, hired at a minimum wage shitty ass job, you know? So, you know, we, like, created this system where the options aren't even good. Kids don't see the incentive, and it's hard because you want to sit down with them and be like, oh, maybe there is an incentive at the end of this. But realistically, like, I don't know. There's not even a good incentive to reason with kids why they should care about this shit.
Yeah, and to me it's like maybe a different, and I'm kind of thinking this on the fly, is like maybe the reason for school should not be to prepare people for the workforce. It should be like a little model society for kids where it's just like, this is how we all get along. What are you interested in? How do you figure it out? How do you interact with all the other kids your age? Or like, how do you get along with people? Like having like clubs and, you know, like, what are you interested in? Like, I think it's like maybe a model for a bigger society where it's not about, you know, doing a job. It's like, what are you interested in and how can you best get along with your peers?
Right. I think also an interesting thing is that,
and having friends and doing fun stuff.
And having friends, yeah. Like, a lot of classroom environments also, like, punish, like, the kids who, like, talk back or act out or, like, class clowns, you know? Mm-hmm. But, like, the class clown is, like, usually not actually a bad kid. Like, that's somebody who does have, like, a talent and a goal, and that's entertaining people. And that involves, like, a huge amount of empathy to be able to, like, understand what people relate to, what they think is funny, you know? And things like that aren't really rewarded either. They're seen as, like, disruptive or distractions, and you know, it just ties into that whole thing where you're like, school is a way that we're trying to, like, prepare people to engage in capitalism, and it's really, like, appropriate in a fucked up, sad way that right out of the gate, these schools are putting cops there. The cops are targeting black and brown kids, getting them put in juvenile detention centers, and then they can expect a lifetime of increased risk of incarceration, increased risk of being sent to prisons where they might be forced to do, like, forced labor, like slave labor against their will. And you're like, in a weird fucked up way, like, schools are preparing kids for the real world because the real world is equally as fucked. They're both so fucked, and it shouldn't happen at any level.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have the school system, I mean, like we have now under, like, capitalism, it's like, why don't you prepare, like, kids with what you really need to know? Like, you kind of need to know, like, some basic stuff to, like,
do your taxes.
Yeah, or it's like taxes, finances, like, maybe, like, like at my school, it's like you could like get your like car degree, you could like weld.
Oh, that would be
like,
so sick. I would love to have done that.
Yeah, I did welding. I don't have my certificate, but
Yeah.
I got certified in CAD.
That's cool.
I was like did drafting for like over like 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4, but like I am technically a certified drafts person
because of your high school.
because of my high school.
That's
like,
wild.
That's actually
That's cool.
like I got jobs because of that.
Yeah.
Like, but I'm just saying like it doesn't really prepare like. Yeah, it really only prepares kids for the carceral state.
Yeah, for the carceral state. It's like, here are your two options. You do labor for, like, a mere pittance and, like, capitalism, and you keep your head down and you do your job and you don't cause any disruptions. Or you do forced labor for, like, no money in the carceral prison system. Like, those are your options, and we're going to route you accordingly. And it's, like, a fucked up sorting hat, right? It's like...
Oh, my God.
It's a racist sorting hat. That's what school is. We put the cops there, and the racist, the hat and the Hogwarts. What is it?
It's racist Hogwarts.
It's racist Hogwarts. All the schools. Anyway, so yeah, that's the school to prison pipeline. Thank you to our listener Charlie Wright for recommending this topic. It's really interesting. It is interesting how it takes into consideration so many things we've done episodes on.
Yeah.
You know, and it all does lead to this point. And I did really like the quote from the essay at the end that it's like, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, man. Like, this issue exists in the world we live in where it's all influenced by the fear-mongering we see on TV, by, you know, like, Republican Party platforms that encourage us to fear our neighbors. And it just comes down to, like, the most fucking punk thing you can do is care about other people, man.
Yeah.
Like, take care of each other and... fuck cops, and they shouldn't be on school campuses.
Keep your friends off the floor.
Yeah.
In the pit.
In the pit. Pick them up. And fucking get rid of the cops on the school. It's just fucked, man. ACAB, including your fucking school cops. Burn it down. Okay, that's it. Do you have anything else you want to add before we're done with the episode?
You can also give us suggestions for future episodes on our Patreon.
Oh yeah, that's how our listeners suggested this one. So if you join our Patreon and you ever want to message us like ideas for future episodes, that's really fun and cool for us, and we like that. Yeah. All right, but that's the episode.
Yeah, and it's patreon.com/pickmeup. I'm scared. But we love you even if you don't go on our Patreon.
Yeah, it's $2. It's $2 to join the Patreon. It's pretty cheap, but it's $2 every month. So, you know, that's $24 a year. That you don't have to give us your $24 a year.
But we appreciate it.
Yeah, but we like your $24 a year if you want to give it to us. That's the episode.